and also our YouTube family. Welcome to another session with Brian and Janice on this beautiful Sunday evening. I pray that everyone has had a beautiful Sunday evening. It has Sunday all day. Has been absolutely beautiful. And I want to first apologize for our tardiness today. We've had a lot going on. I've had a lot going on. And for those of you that know Janice, when she has a lot going on, she has a lot going on. So without further ado, I do want to tell you that I hope you all have been insightful on listening to all of the Derek Chauvin trial. I hope that you all have been in tune to the young girl that was the 16-year-old that was killed by the police. I hope that you all have also been tuned to the 42-year-old gentleman that was killed by the police. That actually happened the morning after, the day after the Derek Chauvin verdict came about. Brian and I are so excited to share with you today, and we pray that you will get as much out of this series as we have. More so should I say, as Brian have, because I want you all to understand that I am learning a lot just like you are. And I believe in the research that Brian does, and I know that we all have a part. But I want you all to be encouraged and to believe first in yourself, believe in God or whomever you trust your higher being to be. I want you to know that there is nothing that you can accomplish, that there's nothing that you cannot do, that everything that was promised to you in this life, you shall receive it in this life. A lot of us are branching out on new venues, which I'm really excited about, I being one. For so long, I've always worked. For those of you that know me, I have never not worked for someone. I've either worked in the hospital, worked on psych units, worked in the doctor's offices. So I just want you to know we have to trust and believe in ourselves and know that whatever path is set for us to take it to another level, you can do that. So without further ado, and I was just sharing it with you guys because I will be sharing something with you all real soon about a venture that I am embarking upon. So let's go, Brian. Let's take it away.
All right, good evening, Facebook family and YouTube family. It's always a good time to invest in yourselves. So I'm excited about the venture that Janice is doing as well. So I've always encouraged her to step out and be what she is, and that is brilliant. So we are looking forward to some upcoming things here in the future.
Definitely.
So we'll have some new announcements to make for everyone. But let me just kind of get into the subject matter on tonight. We're going to be briefly discussing the whole case surrounding Officer Chauvin and the George Floyd incident. And there have been many comments made. There have been many commentaries made by the news media. So we want to look at it from a different angle. As we always do, we want to try to bring you some factual information. And then I want to try to give you a more detailed understanding of why some of the things exist the way they are and why we I don't want to say should not expect change, but change happens slowly whenever it comes to this country. We know that. So we have to keep pressing is the best way to put it. We have to keep moving forward. We have to remain vigilant. We have to stay on guard. We can't let our guard down as it relates to this. So let's jump right in, and I will be engaging Janice so she just don't have to sit here looking pretty. Okay? But anyway, I thought it was very interesting. Before we get started, Janice had an experience where I'm gonna ask her just to kind of comment, give us a brief comment on her experience with the court system.
Yes.
in general, without naming any particular court system, but she served as a juror, and she was actually the juror foreman in the case. So I'm gonna just let her kind of explain that process of the jury selection, and then what the actual ins and out of the jurors that were selected, and then the understanding, give us an understanding of the position of a juror foreman, and then the actual position of the jurors as well in a criminal case.
Okay, I had the opportunity to serve as a juror, and I was selected as a juror foreman. That is the one that gets to read the verdict. And when you're being throughout the trial, this particular trial was a very tough one. This gentleman had Okay, I won't go into detail about the trial, but I want you to know, if you're ever selected, please don't try to get out of it. I think it is a worthwhile experience to do. I really do. I think you can make a difference in the lives of people around you. If you are selected, it's a process that basically you have to show that you're not biased, that you will not be biased in any way. And if you are, don't hesitate to let them know, because it wouldn't be good to be biased. But if you're selected and you are chosen to serve as a juror, please take excellent notes, detailed notes. That is one thing that some people don't do. They want you to do that. They give you the notebooks and pens so that you will take great notes. But in the process, when you go to deliberate and to make the decision on whether you find the person guilty or innocent, it is left up to the foreman to lead that process as far as getting information and making sure that it is fair and equally each person has inputted their information or their decision, fairly. And that means you keep it on the even keel, meaning don't get off the subject, stay within the subject content, go with only the information that you were provided. Don't go outside of that. Don't go on anything in your past or someone else's past. Only stick with the information at hand, and I'm sure you'll make a great decision. But I want to encourage people, if you're offered or if you're sentenced or asked, not sentenced, but if you're asked to serve as a juror or selected, please take that as an honor. It is a civic duty. I encourage people to do that because it was my very first. I said I had to come to a whole nother city to live to be selected. I was never selected when I was in Selma nor Montgomery. So it was an honor for me. I felt good about my decision. I did not regret anything about it. And if I'm ever asked again, as long as I'm not biased toward what the case is about, I will be more than happy to serve again. And I encourage you all to do the same. Is that good enough, Brian?
That's fine. We, in the process of the Derek Chauvin's case, we know that he was found guilty on all charges.
Yes.
As it relates to the George Floyd murder. And we know that there were many of the family member, many of African American people all across this nation celebrated the conviction of Officer Chauvin. Now, let me say this before we get into details about the whole situation, that I think it was a time to decompress. Okay. So I think the celebrations that we saw was a sigh of relief more than it was an actual celebration.
Yes.
It was a time to decompress and to express that finally, in 400 years, we finally have gotten to this point to where it took one of our brothers losing his life, being filmed before the world, in order to get to this place that we are at right now.
And it was
at this moment in history.
It was such a horrific death.
Yes, it was. It was an open execution. It was a filmed execution. So, like I said, I think it was a moment for us as African American people to decompress, as Black people to, have that sigh of relief.
Yes.
But the question remains now, what next? Is this the solution? Is this going to solve anything as it relates to policing in America? Now, I said I did not want to be a skeptic as it relates to that, but in my honest opinion, I don't believe that this solves anything. I'm very happy that the decision came down like it did, but he has not been sentenced yet.
No, he has not.
The sentencing will tell us everything as it relates to this conviction, whether it was smoke and mirrors, whether it was an illusion. It is also going to tell us just how much this country valued Black life, just how much this country valued the African person that exists in this America. So a lot more of the details as it relates to how this whole trial went down and the actual guilty verdicts that came across is going to tell us what this country really thinks about Black people. And then not only that, I believe also we're going to actually see how this justice system looks at a Black life. Okay, so I believe, and I hope that I'm wrong, but I believe that what is going to happen during the sentencing is that this is going to reinforce that this justice system is as corrupt as it has always been, and that it has not changed as it relates to valuing Black life and Black men. Now, hopefully I'm wrong, but what
I think a lot of people feel that way. You're not the only one. Mm-hmm. I've heard a lot of people say the exact same thing you're saying.
Yes. So let's talk about policing in America.
Okay.
And then let me say this. The George Floyd incident, though it was caught on video by the young 15-year-old young lady mm-hmm. that had enough gumption and had enough awareness to video this, yes. This has been going on 400 years. So I'm just one that history repeats itself. So when we look at history, it tells us, like I always say, what is going to happen tomorrow. Mm-hmm. The climate of what we are experiencing right now is based off of historical events that have happened in our past that are now being resurrected and that are now going forward in even into the future. Okay, so when we look at history as it relates to police officers, I want to go back to some of the pre-colonial, pre-American patriarch constitution, and go back to the whole colonial setup that ushered in what we know today as the modern day policing. Okay, the first formation of that we see is in Boston around 1636. Here's the irony of that. In 1636, though there were a limited number of Black people at that time, as far as imported Blacks, when I'm talking about slaves, there were more native Blacks. Okay? Mm-hmm. So when I say native Blacks, Brian, what do you mean? What the colonialists calls the Indian were actually native Black. So when you trace our history and you look at Dr. Ivan Van Sertima's book, They Came Before Columbus, he lets us know that the native people that were in North America were actually migrated from the west coast and the central coast out of Africa, that they were actually traveling the waterways back at that time. And matter of fact, the explorer for so-called Columbus, who so-called discovers America, was actually a black navigator.
Yes, he
okay?
was.
So it is a well-known historical fact that Africans have been coming to North America, to the North American
yes.
country for many centuries.
Yes, yes.
I'm talking about hundreds of years prior to Columbus getting lost and ending up in North America, because that's what happened. Okay,
wow.
So now, and to go into that history, we could do that another time, but let me just share that book with you. If you don't have that book, please get this book. They Came Before Columbus by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. It actually traces the migrational route of the Africans that came to North America that we know today as Native Indians. Okay, it even lays out some of the tribes that they came from in Africa. So anyway, that's a whole nother show, guys, and maybe we'll do that show on the migration patterns out of Africa into the North Americas and into Central America, those places. But those were our ancestors. So we are not ignorant in the fact of knowing that even though in the early 1600s, okay, when you go back to the 1619 deal, that everybody is making a big hoopla about the 1619 project, but there were limited number of Africans that were being transported at that time, and at that time they were operating in the capacity of what we know as indentured servitude.
Okay.
Which means that they worked a certain number of years, and then after that certain number of years, they pretty much bought their freedom. Okay, and when they bought their freedom, any lands that they worked, they retained a portion of the land. Okay. So you see that concept in the Bible is called the year of Jubilee. Okay. So they practiced the same type of concept with the early slaves. Okay. So the native people were the ones that were actually being enslaved and mistreated by the settlers. So when you look at the whole Plymouth colony, okay, in its development, those are the people that were being subjected to the diseases by the colonists, that were dying from the diseases. They were being mistreated, things of that nature. Okay. So what develops in Boston in 1636 is what was called night watchmen. The night watchmen were colonialists that were set in place to actually keep native people and those slaves that were now cooperating with the natives, okay, from running away and from uprising. Okay, so here's the kick on this. Those people that were selected, and at this particular time, those colonialists that participated, they were the common thief in the community. They were the common thug in the community.
Wow.
That were hired by privately funded organizations to actually stand watch for 1 or 2 days a week. And they rotated between those common petty thieves and thugs in the community to watch over the native and the African people. Okay, so very, very interesting. So we move from the 1636 to 1658. And from 1658, you have New York. from 1658 to 1700s. You have Philadelphia. Okay, so from in the 1700s, remember I did a lecture on the slave rebellions.
Yes,
the 1740s, you have the Carolinas, particularly South Carolina. You have the 1740 Negro Act of South Carolina that changes everything. The 1740 Negro Act basically sets in place, okay, laws that were formulated by the legislator that stated that the Negro could not travel at night. He had to have a paper document to move from plantation to plantation.
Wow.
That the Negro could not actually marry a woman that wasn't on his plantation. There were so many laws put in place to prohibit the free movement of the Negro. Also part of that law, they could not have any weapons or anything that would resemble a weapon in the law. That was pretty powerful, because now the common knife, butter knife, became a weapon that was outlawed for the Negro to have. So when you even talk about in their homes, they could not have anything that would be a threat to the colonialist at that time. They were so afraid. So the 1740, if you all get a chance, look that up. It's very interesting. It's an interesting read. But during the 1740 Negro Act that was passed by South Carolina, by the state of South Carolina, another thing that was a dynamic change was the way that they would control the Negro. Okay? They created what they called, what would morph into what is known as paddy rollers or patrols or slave catchers. It is one of the first formations by legislature that we see of a police force put in place to actually control slaves, to catch slaves, to make sure that slaves behaved according to their masters' guidelines and procedures that were set forth. So all of these things were happening before a constitution was actually put in place. So we're still talking about these things happening in the colonies first. So as we fast forward, okay, from 1740, 1790, go back to Boston, to Massachusetts. The 1790 legislation in Boston now funds publicly, okay, funds the movement for slave catchers. So a rise now in slavery, an uptick in slavery. Okay. Also, you see as that uptick is happening, there are more slave rebellions also going on.
I can imagine. Okay? Yes.
Okay, so that would lead to the 1808 Act, to where slaves could no longer be imported into the states, or Africans could no longer be imported into what then was known as the United States in 1808. After the Constitution was signed, they were not legally were not supposed to be imported into the United States. If any state or if anybody was caught bringing Africans in, then they were taxed by that particular state. So it's a very interesting thing. So let's fast forward to 1838. 1838 is where we see the first public funded police department, what I call police department. It is the first public funded, okay, slave catchers gang put in place. All right. So I think the interesting thing there is, now when you look at police departments are all run based off of public funds. Okay. So the same police that are killing us We pay their salary.
Yes.
Okay? So I think it is unique when we look at the history, when we understand why the police department was developed. And also, after the Civil War, here's another interesting thing, is that now the military would now also be used
Wow.
to, and even prior to that, in some cases we see, like we saw in the Nat Turner rebellion. Okay, we saw that the military was also used in curtailing and bringing Nat Turner to so-called justice. Okay, so we see the military used in the same format to catch slaves, to terrorize slaves, to kill slaves, to return slaves back to the plantation. We see the Fugitive Slave Act happens in the 1850s, so on and so forth. 1857, you have the Dred Scott case, just giving you a rundown of history. But what we see happening is the further perpetuation of dehumanizing the African man and the African woman by way of terrorist organizations called police forces and military forces in the United States. So what happens to George Floyd, unfortunately, is the same thing that's been happening to us since we have crossed the waters from the motherland. Now, I think another thing that is striking is that whenever we talk about this type of police brutality, see, when we talk about military brutality, because during all the riots, whenever they feel like the riots are black riots, they call in the National Guard, and they give the National Guard the authority to use whatever force necessary to contain, okay, or either subdue or to disperse the crowds. We do not see the same authority given when it is in reference to white rebellions.
No, we don't.
I.e. the January the 6th rebellion by the Hatfields against the McCoys, okay? By the poor whites against the rich elite that were white. You did not see, a matter of fact, they invited them into the White House. So what we have is the hypocrisy of the United States, okay? Is so blatant, is such a slap in the face that even with this verdict, there's nothing really to rejoice about. It really isn't. So, like I said, when we look at George Floyd, unfortunately, his situation, and it's sad that he had to become a martyr, okay?
Yes.
In order to bring some attention to what we have been dealing with for 400 years.
Exactly, Brian.
It's a violation of human rights.
Yes, it is.
It is a violation of any person's, and it doesn't matter what color you are, to be treated in the fashion that we have been treated for 400 years.
No, it doesn't.
So something has to be done. But let me kind of give you some facts and break down some things for you. In the United States, in the year of 2020, there were more blacks, and we all know this, killed by police in 2020 than any other ethnic group in America.
Just last year.
Okay, just last year, but this is every year. But I'm going to give you
the stats for 2020.
Yeah, I'm going to give you the stats for 2017 up until 2020.
Okay.
Blacks killed by police in 2017 were 223 blacks killed by police in 2017?
223.
In 2017. 2018, 209 blacks were killed by police. 2019, 235 blacks were killed by police. In 2020, 240 blacks were killed by police. 80 of those 240 blacks were unarmed. 164 of those 240 blacks in 2020 were men, and the other half of that number were black women.
Wow.
Okay? In 2021, already 30 blacks, as of Friday, this past Friday,
Wow.
have been killed by the police. Okay? So in 2020, 28% of blacks were killed by the police, despite only being 13% of the population. Now think about that. 28% of blacks were killed by the police in 2020, and we're only 13%. We make up 13% of the population. What is that called, family? That is called population extermination.
Yes, it is.
It is called population control. It is called population regulation.
Yes.
So when you look at the formations of the police department, they have not changed. The formation of the police department developed around bringing slaves back, either dead or alive. There was no value placed on our lives. When police departments in the mid-1800s started being publicly funded, they were publicly funded by government institutions by way of taxes. Black people at that time, 100% of our revenue went directly to fund the slave catchers, to fund all of those different laws that were put in place to murder us, to maim us, to kill us, to depopulate us. 100%, because 100% of our labor made the South and the North, and made this country the wealthiest country in the world.
Yes.
And we funded our own assassinations.
Yes, we did.
Okay? The same thing that we see happen with George Floyd. His taxes went into his own assassination.
Wow.
Publicly. This is a sad commentary for our people. So what am I saying? I say this every time on the show. If we do not demand that the laws change from the federal level, then the local level will continue to do whatever they want to do, especially in those states that are pro-police. Okay? Alabama being one of those states that are pro-police.
Florida,
Okay?
another one.
Florida being a pro-police state. So what do I mean when I say pro-police? Doesn't mean that we are against good police officers.
Right.
Okay? What it means when we talk about a state that is pro-police, it means that the immunity that a police officer has, regardless of what he does in that state, something has to be done to correct that. Okay? So when you give police what the George Floyd situation showed, and very grateful for the black brother that put together the team to prosecute Chauvin. He bought police together. He brought firemen together. He brought public opinion together. He brought witnesses from all over. He put together a dynamic case. He did a wonderful job, but he should not have had to do that when you had over now 9 minutes of footage with somebody having their knee on the neck of a human being. Okay? So what we have to understand is that if something doesn't happen based on federal law, then the states will continue to only regulate police departments in the brutality and the terrorism in the black community at a very minor level. Okay? They will not prosecute these police officers as it relates to the crimes that they commit against blacks. We, as far as progress, will not make much progress in that arena if something doesn't come down the federal pipe to mandate that all police officers have to be uniform in how they function and how they deal with police brutality. So let me go on and give you some more stats. Okay. Blacks are 3.5 times more likely to be killed by police than any other ethnic group in America. Okay. These stats, you can actually go to mappingthepolice.com and you can look at all of these stats that I'm giving you, Facebook.
And that's mappingthepolice.com.
Okay. Mapping the police. Blacks are 1.3 times more likely to be unarmed than white people when they are stopped by the police.
That's exactly right.
Police kill black people at a higher rate than whites in 47 of the 50 states. Okay? So in every state, just about, you might as well say that police targets black people. This is nothing that is out of the ordinary. This is what the police department was set up to do. The police department was not set up to control what they considered to be in the United States their citizens. They were set up to control those that were not citizens. They were set up to make certain that those that they did not consider citizens would not harm the citizens or violate the property of the citizens. See, there was no way that the slave could be considered a citizen because he was considered to be property. Okay? You understand? So, very, very, very powerful. So, 98.3% of the killings as relates to police brutality have not resulted in any charges being filed at all. Let me say that again. 98.3% of the killings done by police perpetrated against black people have not resulted in any charges at all. So what are we celebrating is the question that I have to ask. Like I said, I think it was a time to decompress, and I'm okay with that. But we do not need to paint this false reality like this is going to take care of anything, because it isn't. Also, when you look at the George Floyd Act that is actually, I think, passed the House and now has to go to the Senate, is not going to pass the Senate. We know that. That is being sponsored right now by Representative Karen Bass. Okay, that Kamala Harris, prior to being elected as vice president, and Cory Booker also was a part of putting together this George Floyd Policing Act. When you look at the act itself, family, it really does nothing to rein in police brutality in terrorism against black people. Some of the things that it will do is it is calling for body cams to be cut on immediately
But
before.
basically, they're already doing that, right?
No, they're not.
They're not.
They can cut on body cams at certain times, and it's based on the state laws as it relates to what certain police department mandates are, procedures are.
Okay.
So one thing that it's doing is the body cam. Another thing that it's doing outside of the body cam is calling for police to be trained properly as it relates to conflict resolution. Okay, let me go back to and then I'll give you some more of what it's doing. But we have to also remember that these people that were employed to police these Africans that were uprising, rebelling on these plantations, running away, escaping, that were fighting back, that had joined forces with some of the native tribes, especially in the New York, Massachusetts area. We have to remember that these were the uneducated class also of the community of settlers. Okay? If you all remember, we did a show one time where I talked about the settlers, the paupers, those that came to this particular country,
Right.
that were invited over here by the elite men that wrote the Constitution,
Yes.
that rebelled against the king. They were the poor white trash of Britain, Europe, okay? So these were also the same people that were hired privately initially and then publicly to become police. So what you have now is because people that have an education are refusing to go into law enforcement now. And then you have those that actually had, I guess, quote unquote, a desire to be a police officer, saying, no, it's too dangerous now. They don't make enough money.
Yes.
So we're not going into. So what that is leaving as it relates to a pool to pull from concerning employment is the lowest of the low that don't care anything about black people. So now you're pulling from the same type of group like they did, the criminal, the common thug, okay? The uneducated group of, here we go, still white, backwards thinking people as it relates to black people not being in the same class that they are, not being equal to what they are. Now you employ now these same type of mentalities, which further promotes the continued brutality and terrorism in the black communities. Okay? So we have to think now, what is the federal government really serious about stopping black terrorism? Okay? And I would say no, because half of the senators that are serving now are Ku Klux Klansmen. So they're not really serious about stopping black folks being terrorized by this military type of police faction that do not want to see us in this country at all. Okay? So, family, when we look at this, this goes back to the formation and the creation, the origin of why the police was established. It hasn't changed. Okay? It goes back to the theory of population control. It goes back to the theory of superiority versus inferiority. Okay, it goes back to all of those things. Now, I gave you two things that the federal law does. Okay, one is the body cam, the other is the police being properly trained in conflict resolution. Okay, another part of the law as relates to the George Floyd Act is the vetting of police. Okay, meaning that the applicants need to be more properly screened, if you will.
Yes,
Okay.
I agree.
Prior to them being allowed to even go through an academy.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
So the actual mental status of that person needs to be
Carefully evaluated.
Yes, evaluated more carefully. You're exactly right. So that's another part of the act. And then a portion of the act deals with the anti-lynching laws that we're now trying to introduce as it relates to. So all police murders today are considered to be a form of modern day slave lynchings.
Wow.
Okay, so to deal with that. So that is what we are looking at concerning this George Floyd, like I said, the dilemma, of George Floyd and our brother life being snuffed out. But already there have been 30 other blacks who have also been killed by the police that nobody have heard of. So the media is very selective
On what they let out.
Yes, and who they actually put in front of the camera, and the media have always done that. See,
Well, Brian,
they place what they want, and this is all about. That is about them promoting their agenda as it relates to black people. Okay, to make it appear that they are really concerned and that they are doing something for black people. Okay, it's a way to silence the masses, so to speak.
But with the 42-year-old that was killed, a lot of people didn't know it. I mean, he was killed the morning after the verdict was passed down on Derek Chauvin. Nothing was reported or released until Friday.
And what about the other 29? You understand what I'm saying? So that's what I'm saying. There are lynchings that happen. Another interesting stat that I looked up. Okay. This year, there has been a police killing every day of the year except 3 days out of this year so far.
Wow. Now who knows that?
Okay. That is, so what are we dealing with? We're finally getting, the media is finally, it's undeniable, not so much because the media covering it, but because of the different social media venues that they cannot stop.
People
from people posting it, from it going viral.
Yes.
All of those things.
Yes.
One thing I will say, I was listening to one of my mentors, Professor James Smalls, and he talked about the correlation that this has as it relates to Africa. And maybe next week I'll go into that, because this is not a phenomenon here in the United States. Everywhere black people exist, the same thing is happening. You understand? Okay, so we cannot disconnect ourselves from black people all over the globe. See, the colonial plan to eradicate blacks so that they can take the resources of the Africans was put in place wherever blacks were. Okay, and we were all over the globe. So, and not only that, what we see is even with the diaspora, wherever we were shipped to, there were governmental and legislative, okay, laws put in place to prohibit us from ever being able, even though we have always been the majority, even though they call us the minority. And I explained that. Why the majority is looked at as the minority. That is for political purposes. Okay? So it is always the majority on a political plane that governs the masses of the people. Okay? So even though we have always been the majority, we have been dominated by laws, institutions that are put in place politically to keep us subservient to the minority. You understand? So we have to begin to, what we're doing now, fight the system. You know, go against the system. See, revolution is about tearing up the system. Now, how brainwashed are we as a black people? We are pretty brainwashed when everybody else that comes into this country that are immigrants, they come in to a place that, and they say that they're seeking asylum from the torture and the brutality from their mother country, homeland. We are right here in this country calling ourselves American, being brutalized, attacked, terrorized every day, and then there's no place we could go to. Because we, as black folks in America, have made this our mother country. This is not our mother country. Everybody else that comes here from their mother country, they come seeking asylum. We can't go anywhere to seek asylum. So Mother Africa, to show you how backwards our minds are, Mother Africa, that would be our asylum country, is suffering the same brutality, the same colonialist terrorism, and have got our leaders over there brainwashed to the point to where they will not even stand up and say, no, stop killing our daughters and our sons. They are from here. So we have been fighting this fight as black people in America, as African Americans. You understand what I'm saying? Pretty much on our own. So all of the progress that have been made through our fight and through our tenacity to say, no, we're not going to tolerate being enslaved for another 100 years, another 200 years, or another 300 years, or another 400 years. That we are tired and we are at a place to where we're going to fight back. So there are strength in numbers. If Africa went before the UN Council today, and this is what Brother Malcolm was trying to do and trying to help us to understand, and filed a complaint of human rights violations against the United States, and actually threatened to put sanctions on the United States as it relates to their resources, not allowing them to mine, not allowing them to certain things that the plutonium and all of the other natural resources that we rape and rob and that are shipped from Africa every day. It would cut out police brutality instantly. But because we are so brainwashed and so divided, and we look at the same thing on the islands, when you look at Jamaica, when you look at Brazil, when you look at all of the different islands, we are a separated people. What Brother Marcus Garvey was trying to do was help us to understand that you are stronger united and there is only one Africa. Okay? We are so messed up that black folks in America will identify themselves as American without having a mother country. When everybody else that comes over here, a Chinese American is going to identify himself as a Chinese American. Italian will identify himself as an Italian American, ancestors from Italy. A German will identify himself as a German American. You understand what I'm saying? We identify ourselves as an African American, but don't have any love for Africa. Don't know anything about Africa. Don't study anything about Africa. You understand what I'm saying?
I got it.
Don't have an asylum. See, what we have to understand, the Chinese and the Japanese told America, you will not mistreat our people. They will. Let me give you a perfect example. When I talk about nation building, and this is in my book, so I have to honor Dr. Marcus Garvey, Brother Malcolm, because I understand what they were trying to get black folk to see. A perfect example of nation building is 1947, 1948, called Israel. When the Jews from Poland, the Jews from Europe, the Jews from Germany, all of these Jews, okay, said, we are going home. Palestine, what we know now today as Israel, was not the home of those European Jews. But they all united together and said, we are getting out of this place. We're leaving Germany, and even other parts of Europe, and we want all of our diaspora from all over Europe to come to Palestine.
Which is Israel.
Which is Israel. We're going to carve out portions of the black Palestine, call it Israel, and we want all of our diaspora to come. Now, here's the interesting thing. When the Ethiopian Jews, called the Philashers, tried to go over, claiming their heritage and birthright as the original Jews, they stopped most of them. And the Falasha Jews, which are your black Jews, identify themselves as your black Jews, the Ethiopian Jews over in Israel, they suffered the same terrorism by the hands of the European Jews that carved out black Palestine, had all of their diaspora from all over Europe to come and to take over this place. And guess what? They wrote their own constitution. The United States, France, Europe, all paid them reparations every year, restitutions, even though the United States had nothing to do with the Holocaust. Okay? And they dare you to talk about their people. So if you talk about their people, they call it anti-Semitism. You understand?
Yes.
Okay? Here in America, it's called racism. What it needs to be called is anti-blackism or anti-Africanism. Because it is a country that feels they do not have to respect our people as an African ethnic race of people. Okay? So when Dr. Garvey, when Malcolm, all of these men were talking about discussing nation building, they were doing it based off of the fact that nobody in this world is going to respect you as a people, and nobody in this world is going to befriend you to the point to where they care about you. So you need to do something for yourself. I go back to 1954 when Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana said, self-government now is the only way that we will liberate ourselves. Okay? So when we look at the great Kwame Nkrumah, when we look at Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, the United States assassinated all of these men, okay, with political coups. When we look at Patrice Lumumba, when we look at Nyerere, when we look at some of these great African liberator presidents and movers and shakers that influenced parts of the movement that we know as the civil rights movement,
Yes.
that we know as the Black Power movement. Those movements were also influenced by the leaders in Africa. So we have to get back to that. We have to understand, if the Jews can carve out a piece of land, okay, and say that it's theirs when it's not, based off of their European ethnicity, we need to stand up and demand from the UN, if nothing else. Marcus Garvey said, Africa for the Africans. Demand all of our land back. It's only when we stand up together that we're going to see police brutality end, is what I'm trying to say. Okay? If we do not stand up together, because you can go anywhere in the world, and I have traveled the world, being military, for 8 years. I've been in Spain, Italy, I've gone everywhere. Right outside of Africa, Kuwait, Iraq, all of these places treat black folks the same way. There is no difference in the treatment from the Muslim to the European. It doesn't matter. They treat black people the same way. So we have to begin to realize that this struggle is more than just a few states saying that we're going to put in a police reform act and we're going to establish a police committee board to look at certain crimes that are committed in the community. Those police committee boards are going to be influenced by politicians. They're not going to do anything. And the blacks that sit on them will be bought out eventually.
Wow.
So they're not going to make a difference at all. Okay? So that's what I think of a police committee board. It is a board that's going to be put in place by the upper echelon that feels like they got a little political clout. They're going to get there. They'll be bought out on cases. If nothing will happen that will actually transform the black community, that will make a difference and stop some of the terroristic acts that are going on in our community.
That is so sad.
So
that is so sad.
That's my opinion.
Well, that's what's happening.
You understand what I'm
That's
saying?
what's
So
happening.
we have to begin to look at the whole picture. Okay? We have to understand what Dr. Frances Wilson said, our ancestor. She said that if you do not understand white supremacy, everything else you think you understand will be obscure. It's non-relevant. If you do not, because everything you do in this country, the underlying foundation of it hinges upon white supremacy.
Wow.
Okay? And it's not until that whole system is attacked, it's not until we unhinge that system that we're going to see any kind of freedom take place. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I got on one of my pontifications. We don't tangent. I tell you that all the time.
Pontifications.
That's
Okay,
right.
Brian. Have it your way.
There's no tangents.
I forgive your wordsmith. I'm with you on that. Thank you guys for watching. We enjoyed today's show. We hope that you will share this show. We appreciate those of you that are faithful watchers. Hi, Phyllis. Yes, we can always depend on you. Gwen England, Phyllis Moore, Cynthia West, Valerie Man Poe. We thank you guys and we love you. And those of you that I didn't call, don't take it offensively, but those are the ones that I know they are pretty faithful about tuning in. If not for the whole show, they will go back and watch the show. And I also saw my friend Rosie McGee on today. Thank you, Rosie. So Brian has another book he wants to bring about.
All right. This is The Fate of Africa. This is everything you need to know. It's a pretty thick read, but it's everything you need to know about the coups that were carried out by the United States and European governments that actually colonized Africa. So on one show, I want to do a whole show on the 1884 carving up of the continent of Africa, and the Europeans basically bidding on Africa and separating Africa at the the little session that they had. We'll talk about that.
So Brian, before we close out, is there anything that you can say to
in Germany, in Berlin,
help us to understand? I know you always say whatever takes place, we need to start on a local level.
Mm-hmm.
That means that politicians that you select locally in your local government, they are the ones that you can have the greatest effect on.
Absolutely.
So what is it that we can, even if we can just make a little difference, just put a marking on it, just a dent in it. Just think if everybody that, you can just say adults ages 35 to 65. If we could make a conscious decision to do one thing, what can we do?
Well, I think we have to continue to lobby for those political positions on a local level to make change. And we have to continue to, as Black people, demand from our politicians, local politicians, number one, that they go there to serve the interests of Black people. That's number one. Number two, that they not be afraid to actually make laws that will change the dynamic of what their Black people are dealing with on a local level. And then I think number three, if Black people that we put in office turn out to be of none, as far as serving, to turn out to be non-effective, or turn out to buy into the system or to be bought out by the system, we need to make sure we get them out of office. So with having said that, there needs to be a system to where Black people vote together to put Black people in office and to remove Black people out of office. Our concentration does not need to be on putting a white person in office politically. And I'll give you an example. There's no reason, if you're in a 75 to 80% city that is Black, that you should have any council persons that are of European descent. If you're in a city that is 75 to 85% Black, if you do have that, then that is going to be a lineage of what I call racism by Blacks against Blacks. Okay, so what you have is you have Blacks with white minds, and Dr. Frantz Fanon called them Black face with white mask, but you have Blacks with white minds that buy into the concept that their ice water is a little bit warmer than the ice water of the Grand Master that's sitting in whatever seat on the council that he's sitting in, or sitting in the mayorship or whatever. And they continue to sway votes to re-elect that Grand Master over and over and over. Okay, so Black people that do not understand that our people cannot advance without having Black people that truly love their race. Okay, we cannot have Black people up there that will pander to every other race except theirs. Okay, and there's no other group that does that. When a Hispanic gets into office, they represent the Hispanic population. They don't care anything about what the white folks do. They don't care anything about what the Black folks do. You understand what I'm saying? They go up there to represent Hispanics. Okay? So we have to have that same type of mindset if we're ever going to advance. And on a local level, we have black folks, we have black politicians that try to fit in to the white agenda. They want the recognition. They want to go to the conferences. They want to be on every TV op. They want to, and it is a sad commentary, because they want to be seen rubbing shoulders and, oh, I was with the governor this day and then me and that. Nobody cares about you being with the governor. What are you doing to make sure that you try to change laws that are adversely affecting black people? We have all of these black attorneys now.
Yes.
Okay? And they can do nothing to change any laws with all of their white man's law degrees. You understand what I'm saying? So they're trained at a white institution.
But there are black institutions too, Brian.
Yeah, but they still learning the white man laws. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So therefore if they're not educated enough in that law to say, hold up, here's a loophole to help my people. You understand what I'm saying?
I think Ben Crump does that.
Here's a loop. I won't comment on Ben Crump. But he does what he does, and that's all I'll say about that. But I'm talking about on a local level, these are the things that must happen. Mm-hmm. And our local politicians need to know the history of what they are dealing with. Many times we have black people that go into politics and they do not take time to study the politics of that city or that state. So they go in behind the 8 ball. They go in having to learn, and what they learn, they're being taught by the ones that want to keep them subservient and that think they are inferior anyway. So what they're learning will serve as no application concerning helping black people. You understand what I'm saying? So we're back at square one. You're dealing with the same thing. Most people just want to be in the council seat to say, I'm a city councilman. Okay? But yet the black ghettos, I say this all the time, are continuing to get worse. Black education's continuing to get worse. Our children are continuing to kill each other at an all-time high rate. Okay? There are no jobs in the community. What are we doing? Are we just playing around? Is this just for notoriety? Is it a popularity contest? What is it really about? You understand what I'm saying? So those are the things that we have to start doing to hold our black officials, accountable and responsible. Our tax dollars pays their salaries. They're supposed to serve the people, Yeah,
we're the highest consumers.
If they can't do that, then we need to make sure we get black people in there that will at least read the city budget and not just take somebody's word for it. That, you understand what I'm saying? Most of the city councilmen don't even read the city budget. They don't ask any questions. They ready to get off and go home and get a drink. It's a sad commentary is what I'm saying.
Wow.
Okay? So we have to put people in office that are responsible. Just because they may have a law degree or a business degree doesn't mean that they know politics. And that is, I think, is our Achilles heel, is that we do not have black people that take out the time. They can watch everything else on TV, American Idol, all these other shows, but they refuse to go get a Black's Law Dictionary. They refuse to pick up an Alabama law politics, And so these are the type of things that we have to stop and say no more. We're not going to continue to perpetuate our own demise by way of sending people into or putting people into a political position and they have no idea on who they're going to serve. They just have black skin. They have no idea on what a bond is. They have no idea on how to float a bond. They have no idea on actual political terms. They have no idea on how to budget, monies. All of these things makes a difference. They have no idea on law as it relates to certain legislation that can only takes one sentence to change the whole dynamic of what we're dealing with in the legislation. So these are things that we have to begin to demand that our black people that we go, that we send to represent us are educated. And if we need to, let's send them to make sure they go to a 40-hour course on how to be a city council person, how to read legislation,
that, Brian.
how to propose certain legislation.
But they do that. They go.
They may go, but they're not being taught.
Ooh.
So there's a difference.
Okay.
Some of them go just to sit in the class. But if they cannot pass a test to and articulate their position on certain things and learn how to be a part of the process when it comes to writing the laws and to writing legislation, and understanding what legal terminology is being used as it relates to the population. You understand?
Yes.
That continue to omit black people, then something is wrong.
Okay.
That's so.
Well, you heard it from the historian, the researcher. Okay. Thank you guys for joining. I really appreciate you all. Thank you, Sanithia Petway, for coming on. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you, Miss Watley. You guys, we really appreciate you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Absolutely. Be blessed. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, same place. Well, it'll be 6:30 next week, not 7 o'clock Janice's time. So, thank you guys, and have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.